Firefall was really lucky, and we hit it at the right time. But the thing I have to say is the main thing that determines whether you're a band or an artist or to get on the radio or whatever is the song. You got to have the song. In fact, you got to have songs, plural. And the thing is that, well, here's a kind of cool story, and talk about the intertwining nature. I'll try to make this quick.
Take your time, man. Take your time.
Okay, good. So when Rick Roberts replaced Graham Parsons in the Flying Burrito Brothers, Burritos played in Washington, D.C., and after the show, Rick Roberts, the new lead vocalist, went to this club to hear this phenomenal female singer, Emmylou Harris. And Rick basically, discovered Emmylou. And he called Chris back at the hotel, and Chris said, "I'm already in bed. No, I'm not going to come down." And Rick's going, "You got to come here, see her." And Chris kind of, and he takes a cab down, and they see Emmylou Harris for the first time being a folk singer in Washington, D.C. And a few days later, Chris Hillman called Graham Parsons, his old buddy from the Byrds and the Burrito Brothers, and said, "I think we might have found the gal you're looking for." And a year or so later, Graham and Emmylou and the Fallen Angels, with a guitar player who had just joined the band, they wanted Graham and everybody wanted James Burton, who had played all over the Graham's records, but Elvis said, "You're not going out with anybody else. You're my guitar player." So they said, "Okay. Oh, hey, how about Clarence White?" And Clarence White was with the Byrds then, so the two top guitar players they wanted to hire weren't available, and they hired a guy kind of sight unseen in the 11th hour, and they got in the bus and drove to their first gig in Boulder, Colorado. And I got a call from the manager of the club that they were going to play at and said, "Jock, you better get down here. You might have a gig." And I went, "Who with?" And he said, "Graham Parsons." And I went, "Who?" And he said, "The Flying Burrito Brothers, the Byrds." "Oh, yeah. Okay, great." I went down there and I watched their first gig. And the guitar player that they had was mostly a acoustic player, and he was real nervous and got drunk. And they knew they needed to find a guitar player. And I got asked to sit in with them the next night. And I did. And fortunately for me, the band that was opening the show was kind of a 50s rock band that I'd go sit in and just play great at on the, be a rock guy, do what I do. So they saw that I could play. Then and they took a vote after the show and said, "Well, we need a really good rhythm guitar player. Number two, we need a good rock guitar player, soloist who can play on our rock stuff. But mostly we need a really great country picker, a la James Burton, right? And all the records, right?" And they looked at it, and I was a terrible country picker. I had no experience in that at all. But I was the first two, and they said, "Well, 2 out of 3 is better than 0 out of 3." And I got hired. Oh. And the next morning at 9 a.m., the bus left for Austin, Texas. And I remember the late, great steel player, Neil Flans, and I in the back of the bus trying to drop the needle on the turntable so I could try to learn that particular James Burton lick and stuff. Yeah. The end of this little part of the story is that the second gig we played in Liberty Hall in Houston, we're playing our set, and onto the stage walk Neil Young and Linda Ronstadt. Oh, and it was the first time Emmylou Harris and Linda ever met or sang together. And, and after we played, Neil says, "Hey, I'm having a party back at my hotel suite. Come on over." And so 3 bands, Neil Young's band, Linda Ronstadt's band, and Graham Parsons' band with Emmylou Harris go back to Neil's palatial suite in Houston. Mass quantities of everything, stay up till dawn just about. But the most amazing thing was Graham, as he was wont to do, grabbed the guitar of Neil's and started playing like 20 country songs. by the Louvin brothers and stuff, who I'd never heard of before, but what was amazing was about 5 feet away from Graham, Linda and Emmy Lou sat face to face, about 6 inches apart, nose to nose, and blended their voices together for the very first time. And it was not only magical, but we all knew it was historic. It's like, wow,
Yeah.
And so for when I met, so I fell into that band and the Fallen Angels. And when we got to New York City, Rick Roberts, ex Flying Burrito brother, was playing the next night at the same place. And he came down to see Emmylou Harris, who he discovered, and to see Graham, who he'd replaced in the Burrito Brothers, and see the band. And, and that's where I met Rick Roberts. And we said, you live in Boulder? I live in Boulder. Hey, we should get together. Now, sidelight is that Rick didn't think I was a very good country picker, which I wasn't,
right.
But he came into a club where I was playing with my rock and roll band. I had been playing rock and roll, and he said, God, that's the same guy, and I started playing with him, and he was going to make his third solo record on A&M Records, and he wanted me to be his guitar player, and I went, great. So we started playing. That's when Mark Andes started jamming with us. Mark Andes from Spirit and JoJo Gunn, who, along with all those other people, moved to Boulder, right? And Mark, as soon as Mark got involved with the songs, it didn't feel like a solo record anymore. It felt like a band. And Rick said, I know a guy, Larry Burnett in Washington, D.C., who writes great songs and sings great with me. You want to hear a song? And Mark and I go, sure. And, this was, a couple of years before cassette tapes were invented. So he put on a big old reel to reel. And the first song that played was Larry's song, Cinderella. Oh. And we just went, oh my God, get him out here. Larry came out in the first week of practice, before we had a band name, before we had a gig. It was Rick Roberts and Larry Burnett, the two singer-songwriters, myself, and Mark Andes. It was about a month before Michael Clark joined the band, but we had a drummer that we were trying out. From that first week of practice, we had 20 to 25 songs to work out that Rick and Larry were presenting. Unbelievable, unheard of. And the cool thing about that was the songs were so good. A year and a half later, when our first album came out, a lot of those songs like Mexico and Livin' Ain't Livin' and Cinderella and It Doesn't Matter were on that record. So Firefall has always been about the songs. Okay. And it's not about the guitar player or the, this or that. It's about the songs. And as a lead guitar player, having been, classically and jazz trained by a really famous jazz guitar player named Johnny Smith when I was like 8.5 years old till 14 or something. I learned pretty much just being in that situation with a maestro kind of teacher, that anything you play as a guitar player, whether it's just chords or licks between or a full solo, you need to enhance the song. It is the song that is number one, and unfortunately, a lot of guitar players never really got that. They want to show off and play fast and hey, but Firefall's always been about making the musicians with the best thing we could do to make their song sound better. So I think that's Firefall's strength all along.